We are really wanting to redefine what a computer scientist looks like and does. No longer is it the white guy in a hoodie in a basement. We really want to show that there are Katherine Johnsons all over the world, and that these young women who are rising the ranks are just as qualified and talented and should be just as respected as the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world.
This is the CMO and Joe podcast. We interview today's most inspiring chief marketing officers and savvy marketers of lucrative direct-to-consumer e-commerce companies, bringing you insightful stories and tips on marketing, sales, branding, and much more. We bring you the best lessons from the best. Let's get started with your host, Joe Momoh.
Welcome to the podcast, Ashley.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yes, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. Obviously, you do such great work, and the organization we work for as well. But before we jump into all of that, perhaps give us a bit of a backstory about yourself and kind of your origin story.
Sure. So I grew up in the Washington, D.C. Area, and I'm an only child, and I've always really been very curious and very observant. So, when I was thinking about what careers I would want to go into, the first thing that popped in my mind actually was journalism. And in high school, I was on our school newspaper. I did a really great newspaper internship at Howard University in high school. And I knew I wanted to be a print journalist. I get to college, I get to Howard, and I, am working on the newspaper, really excited. And then all of a sudden, I kind of have this thought of, do I want to really be chasing these stories forever? And is that really my passion? And I took a public relations class, and I was like, this is it. I was like, this combines my love of business and my love of communication. I think this is going to be like my new journey. So I switched my major, or my concentration, I should say. I have a journalism degree from Howard. And I switched my concentration to public relations. And from there, I was really, really interested in working in an agency. I had several agency internships in college. And then I got a great opportunity to work at Ogilvy Worldwide in New York City upon graduation. But the job that I was hired for was actually, or the program that I was hired into was their associates program in their advertising agency, not PR. So coming into working at Ogilvy, I knew I had agency experience, so I knew what to expect, but I was really not as familiar with the advertising and marketing world as I was with the PR communications world. So it was a great opportunity for me to learn about what is done on the advertising and marketing side, while still working in an environment that I was familiar with, which was an agency. I worked at Ogilvy for 3 years, and I really enjoyed my time there. I learned so much from some really smart people, and I really honed my skills on working in more of a digital marketing realm, as well as working on website development. When I entered the workforce, it was 2008. So it was a recession, and no one was making splashy TV ads during that year. So I really was able to sink my teeth into, what was developing in the world of like web marketing, as well as SEO and, different types of analytics mixes. So I was really able to dig my teeth in there, which are traits that I carried on throughout the rest of my career.
That's really outstanding, Ashley. One thing I wish I would have known when I first began my career is kind of having that foresight of what I truly wanted to do. But for you personally, what's one thing you wish you would have known when you first began your career?
I think the one thing I wish I would have known when I first started my career is more about mentorship and how to ask for help. I think that I felt very, very confident in my ability to work in a workplace. But, until you're tested, you don't really know what you don't know. And I think that in those moments when I was tested early on in my career, I wish that I had understood what what type of questions or what type of knowledge I needed from a mentor, versus always relying on my manager to be that person, or, relying on peers to be sounding boards, but actually really having someone who could provide me with mentorship and also advocacy. Is something that I wish I had learned early on, which I think are things that young people in their career are getting more and more now. But I think that it was a little bit early, especially outside of traditional corporate spaces. I don't think that it was as promoted.
Absolutely. You mentioned mentorship. I know a lot of our listeners are always asked the question of how do you find a mentor? So I'm curious to know from you, Ashley, how or what kind of strategies do you go about finding a good mentor?
I have had I've had the great fortune of having a mentor who actually interviewed me for my job at Ogilvy. She was a Howard alumna, and she came to campus, and she was an account director at Ogilvy, and she interviewed me for the job. And I was, so enamored with her. She was such an amazing, Black woman in the advertising space, which is not something that you normally see in executive roles. And I just kind of stuck with her. Our careers have both evolved, but still, whenever I have a need to sort of check in with someone that I know knows me and knows my career, I always come back to her, and we've developed a great friendship throughout. And I think that, outside of having, a good friendship and personal relationship with her, things that I've looked for in other mentors and ways that I found other mentors have honestly been, really just asking. Learning a little bit about someone, particularly if they're inside of the organization where I work, and, asking if, they have time for a coffee, or, sending them an email and just, congratulating them on a win that they recently had as an opener. People do enjoy being congratulated, and just sort of trying to find a place where you have some commonality, but also trying to find a nugget of ways that you can both work together. I think that mentorship sometimes, the person who's being approached to be the mentor, they can kind of shy away because they think that it's going to be a one-way relationship. And in some instances that's necessary. I think when you think about advocacy and having someone who is your advocate, that oftentimes is a one-way relationship. The advocate being the person that is, advocating for you in rooms where you're not. But I think with mentorship, I think that it can be a two-way street. I would say with my mentor, Dara, she and I talk a lot about trends in the industry, and there are a lot of things that I may know that she doesn't, because she's not in the trenches in some of those areas. And she's able to sort of help me step back and take a look at the big picture, because that's where where she is in her career. So I think that with mentorship, it's important that you can see both sides. But I think when you're talking about having an advocate, I think oftentimes you enter those relationships where, the person who's advocating for you in places where you may not be, or with people who you don't have access to, they need to have a vested interest in wanting to see you succeed, even if there's not necessarily an immediate benefit to them.
Right. Well, that's absolutely true. One thing I do want to ask you is, what kind of unique skill would you say you have that's helped you become successful in your career?
I think a unique skill that I have really that's helped me be successful, and that's actually something that I kind of saw as a weakness in the beginning, is that I can be a very empathetic manager and empathetic coworker. And I think that, in today's environment where we are grappling with so many personal changes, whether it be social justice movements here in the US, or whether it be dealing with the pandemic and dealing with family, different types of family dynamics, I think that it's really important that you're able to level with and empathize with your coworkers, as well as people who you manage. I think that can only be for me, what I've seen is that that's drawn me closer to people. And, it's allowed me to have grace when I need it. I receive grace from them, but it's also allowed me to be able to give grace when needed, as well as not feel badly if I need to be firm. Because I think that, people understand where I'm coming from and understand that, like, I'm not one way, but that I truly care about their development, and I truly care about what's going on in their lives. And if the time arises where we have a disagreement, it comes from a sort of a grounded place, not from a malicious place.
Right. No, empathy for sure is key sauce in building good relationships and progressing in your career. But it's also interesting that you mentioned the two issues going on, social justice, the pandemic. From your perspective, though, what's kind of been the biggest challenges for you personally the last 90 or 100 days?
Yeah, so I live in Brooklyn, New York. I live alone. So when we were told that we would no longer be coming into the office and we would be quarantining, I have parents who are, in that sort of class of folks that are more susceptible to COVID. So I didn't really feel good about going home. I felt like, this is going to blow over, I'm going to stay here and hunker down in my apartment. And I think that, within the pandemic, I really had to, get used to being alone more than usual. And, I'm, again, like I said, I'm an only child, so I, should love my alone time, and I do, but you really underestimate, how much you get out of having interactions with folks at work or socially. So that was something that I've struggled with, is just sort of still feeling connected to friends and family, being that person that's always wanting to get on a Zoom call, a Zoom happy hour. Do you want to have a Zoom brunch on Sunday? Like, my friends and I got really creative with that. But I would say that's been my struggle. And then, going through something that, like, we're going through with the pandemic, where, emotions are so up and down, and there's so much sadness and grief, oftentimes we grieve as a community. And I'm fortunate that I work, at Girls Who Code, where we rally together around each other. And, we created those spaces for ourselves within the organization, but it was definitely hard. It was harder than I think we all thought it would be to be separate from each other. And I think in terms of, the Black Lives Matter movement and what we've seen after the death of George Floyd, I can say that, unfortunately, this is not the first time that, as a Black woman, I have had to come to work and present myself as a person who is not experiencing, some of these issues. What I found heartening and so incredible is that, as an organization at Girls Who Code, we really rallied around our staff and rallied around each other to, say that it's okay not to be okay. And, to name the feelings that we were feeling, whether it was anger or sadness or disappointment, and as an organization, really deal with and grapple with, some of the even, issues that were coming up within ourselves, and really being committed to dealing with any sort of racial injustice or inequities that we felt we were feeling inside the organization, but also making sure, first and foremost, that our students were supported. And, over 50% of the girls in our Girls Who Code program are from historically underrepresented groups, which means that they are Black or Latina, or receive free and reduced lunch, which is a metric that's used in education in the U.S. And we know from the stories that we hear from our girls that they were really struggling. And we wanted to make sure that they felt supported, in this virtual space, and knew that they had support from us as an organization.
Yeah, it sounds like Girls Who Code are taking all the right steps to really address these issues. But before we continue, maybe we'll add a little bit more context to the listeners. Could you just briefly explain what Girls Who Code does?
Yes. So Girls Who Code is a global nonprofit organization. We have been around for 7 years, and we serve over 300,000 girls in the US, Canada, India, and the UK. We are an organization that's dedicated to closing the gender gap in entry-level technology jobs by providing girls with the training and skills they need to enter the computer science space. We were founded by a woman named Reshma Sajani. She is the author of a best-selling book called Brave Not Perfect. And she really, really, came about Girls Who Code in a very unique way. She was running for office in New York City, and she was going to do different campaign stops and realized that when she would go into these schools, particularly in high school, and she would go into computer science classrooms, there would be no girls, or there would be one. And the girl would be like not saying anything. And, she was really concerned that young women were being left behind in the technology space, particularly as it relates to women of color, because we know that these tech jobs are the key to moving up into the middle class. And it was very, very important to her that she figured out a way to make these girls not only feel confident, but, to show them that they could do anything. Coding, learning to code was one thing, one aspect of that. But, we really instill in our girls the message of sisterhood and bravery and candor as core values of our organization, and letting them know that, the summer or school year that you spend in our programs is only a stepping stone to what you can do. And thankfully, a majority of our girls, a majority of our alumni go on to major in computer science. And then now we have a cohort of young women who are in the workplace who have come through our program. So we're, extremely excited about the future and what it holds. We've been fortunate that our staff, particularly our education team, has been so instrumental in pivoting our programs virtually. Every day we are, astounded by the great work that we see coming out of those teams to continue to support our girls during the pandemic. Obviously now looking ahead to the next school year, and what that means for our programs going forward.
That's fantastic. What would you say is what would you say is your favorite part of your current role right now?
So as marketing director of Girls Who Code, I think my favorite part of the work is the culture change work that we're doing. We are really wanting to redefine what a computer scientist looks like and does. No longer is it the white guy in a hoodie in a basement. We really want to show that, that there are Katherine Johnsons and Ayanna Howards, who's a roboticist, all over the world. And that these young women who are rising the ranks are, just as qualified and talented and should be just as respected as the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. So, sharing with communities and sharing the message that girls can do anything that they want to put their minds to, and that girls are change makers in their community, has been a part of my work that I can't get enough of.
That's awesome. I just want to switch gears a little bit, maybe a little bit more marketing talk. But I'm curious to get your perspective, Ashley. How has the industry changed from when you first started your career to where it is today?
I think the biggest thing that's changed in the industry is the fact that there's fewer and fewer barriers, and fewer and fewer barriers to connecting with consumers. So, before when I first started, social media was really Facebook and Twitter. And for some brands, they only use those as mechanisms to share a one-way conversation. They just wanted to say, we have a new product or we have an announcement, but they weren't really using these tools as ways to get information back from their consumer. and from their, from the consumer. And I think that now the amount of direct, quick, instant feedback that you get on social media is really lowering the barriers to creation. And I think it's making us go to market extremely fast. And, oftentimes the companies that are left behind are those that are still following like that traditional marketing cycle, that traditional, sort of CPG model of, a whole year marketing cycle. And I think that now, that can't exist anymore. And we have to be faster and more nimble in order to, react to some of the things that are going on in the world. And I think that brands are, particularly as it relates to social justice, I think that brands are trying. But I think as we can see, a story that's popped up today in the US is the country music group Lady Antebellum changing their name to Lady A and not realizing or ignoring the fact that there was a blues singer whose name was Lady A, and now they're suing her. So, really being as a brand, like you really have to be steadfast in your values, and you have to decide, is this something that you care about? And if so, you need to care about it and see it through. You can't, it can't be a performance. And I think that is, again, a sign of the times. Consumers are just not going to stand for that. And I think that it is important that brands remember that authenticity is really king in this environment. Absolutely.
Authenticity is the secret sauce, I'd say. Like you're saying, it shouldn't be a one-way conversation. You should include your audience and have their perspectives included, and also stand for your values. You did mention social media, though. What are some of your favorite social media networks to build that authenticity and marketing campaigns?
So we've seen amazing success with using Instagram for Girls Who Code. A majority of our core demographic, or the girls that we serve, are girls that are between the ages of 12 and like 20 years old. What we find as being an organization that is also rooted in the women's empowerment space is that millennial women love and are fans of our organization. So we feel like Instagram has been a great sweet spot for us, because not only are we able to reach our, core demographic of girls in our programs, we're also able to engage with women who are a bit older, and who can, donate or, be our cheerleaders. And we find that we've had such great, amazing campaigns using Instagram. We are dabbling in TikTok, which is where our students are, and, finding great success with that. It does mean that sometimes, we have to let our hair down as a staff and be a little bit more participatory. But also there's amazing memes on TikTok that are done by, great young women sort of demystifying computer science or poking fun at, different aspects of coding that can be frustrating. So we're finding, TikTok to also be a great medium for us as well.
Awesome. Will we catch you guys doing some TikTok dances on TikTok as well?
There is a video on our Girls Who Code channel from our sisterhood campaign. I think it's been up there probably for a little bit over a year. I am not doing a TikTok, but I enthusiastically encourage anyone who wants to get on there.
That's awesome. One thing I wanted to touch on with you is maybe if you can share, but what's been kind of the most successful marketing campaign that you've ever worked on?
Sure. I think that the most successful marketing campaign that I've ever worked on actually is a campaign that I worked on in the beginning of my career, early on in my career, I should say. I worked on the Michelle Obama campaign called Let's Move. I was a part of the team that launched the first iteration of the Let's Move campaign, which was a campaign to encourage young people to get out and exercise and to eat healthy. And I think that, that was Mrs. Obama's platform, and that was something that she didn't waver from during the first term of President Obama's presidency. And I think that just understanding the strategic, value that my agency provided and that our creative team was able to execute and see the iterations of that over time throughout that first term was incredible. And I think that beyond the sort of political realm, I think that it was a very, very important message that was able to be cascaded down and channeled into so many different avenues, whether it was Mrs. Obama doing push-ups with Ellen on the Ellen show, or whether, she was, she was talking about healthy eating on the White House lawn. I think there were just so many pieces of that campaign that were able to live on that I found that to be extremely successful.
Oh, that's really awesome. I didn't know you were part of that campaign.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what's kind of some of the biggest mistakes or maybe even challenges when launching a new marketing initiative?
So I think that some of the biggest challenges, and also sort of mistakes that are made, is not really sticking to who your core audience is. We find that, sometimes at Girls Who Code, we have two really big campaigns, or one of our biggest campaigns is on International Day of the Girl, which usually falls around October 11th. And, every year around, the beginning of the year prior to the campaign launching, we always create a strategy and we always say, okay, we're targeting this group. And then we hire an agency sometimes, and we get down the road, and then we're oftentimes, faced with, well, should we consider this group? Should we really just be targeting Gen Z? Should we try to target millennials as well? And oftentimes that's where your message can be diluted. And I think that, depending on what your goal is, I think it's important that you speak to the people who you intended to sell to or who you intended to reach. I don't think that you can water down something or, elevate something to a level that's not understandable if you're trying to talk to a younger group. If you're trying to talk to millennials are a huge group. So you can't talk to them like you're talking to Gen Z. Many millennials have children and mortgages, so I think that it's important that you really stick to the group that you're targeting and that you really, have confidence that that message is going to resonate with them and that you're going to get them the result that you're looking for.
Absolutely. What's sort of like a exciting marketing trend that you've come across or you're witnessing right now from your perspective?
I am fascinated by all of the ads that are coming up around the pandemic, to be honest. I have not seen huge corporations like car companies pivot to a message that is, so resonant that by the time it airs, it's almost out of date. I think that it's amazing, being on the other side of that when you're asking your client, can we do this in 2 weeks? And they're saying it's going to be 2 weeks to get approvals. Like these ads are being made in 2 weeks' time. And I think that, the use of sort of digital technology, like taking Zoom videos or personal videos and stringing them together and making them into, TV quality, broadcast quality ads, I think is incredible. I think that it's only going to change our industry for the better. I think it's going to really allow us to be a lot more creative. And we have to be, because we don't know, how long this is going to last. And, the world is not stopping. And I think we have to figure out ways to work within this environment.
Are there any brands or even marketers in particular that you've admired? You mentioned the pandemic ads, but have there been any companies or brands that it's really resonated with you?
I think that where I am where I see it the most, it's the most stark change. And it's not that I'm not a driver, but I'm really fascinated by the automotive industry and what they've been able to do. I think that they've been able to, pivot to now this summer, their ads that they're doing this summer are all around, like taking a road trip, because that's really the main way that people are traveling. And to really, when you stop and think about it, because this should have been the time when all we would be seeing are ads around the Olympics. So let's just really stop and think that like the Tokyo Olympics were supposed to be now or in the next few weeks, and we would have been blanketed with "Thank You, Mom" from Procter and Gamble, and introducing these Olympic teams, and those ads were in the can, like those have been filmed long ago. And now for us to be, seeing these ads that are like directly pivoting to a message of, pack your family in the car and drive across country or whatever. I'm really, fascinated by how the automotive industry has been able to pivot in that way. Whether or not that works, whether or not people are trusting that this is the time to travel, or whether or not people are even buying cars or can afford to buy cars is another story. But I think that that's been really interesting.
Well, that's some great insight. Only a few more questions here for you, Ashley.
Sure.
One thing I did want to ask, though, what's kind of the biggest thing that Girls Who Code does that maybe people don't know too much about?
So I think the biggest thing that we do that people don't know too much about is I think some of our international work is not as well known. We do have clubs across Canada. And I think that another piece of our work that's unknown is really how much we are servicing underserved populations and how that is changing their lives. I think that we tend to get girls in our programs that are so eager to change the world. And, when we see it from the projects that they do, whether, we had a group of girls a few years ago create a project to end period stigma, and it was a game called Tampon Run. And, just this summer during our virtual summer immersion program, we've seen girls creating activist toolkits on how to educate their family members on the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that just, some of these young women have been underestimated their whole lives, but we are giving them a platform and giving them the skills to, use the medium of coding and technology to share their message with such a broad audience. That I think that is something that I don't know that people know about our organization, about, some of the work that we're doing to instill bravery and to instill self-confidence in a lot of these young women is something that's really important to me that we continue to show or show more, and that more people would know about our organization.
That's wonderful. What's this one's a little bit maybe a trickier question. I don't know, but what's one question that you never get asked that you wish you would be asked?
That is a tricky question.
Not to stop you there, Ashley.
I think that I wish that more people, would ask me about, so I think I wish that more people would ask me more about what you've asked me a lot about, industry trends. I think that is something, because I'm a little bit of a nerd, that I've always been into. But I think that, a lot of times when people are talking to me, they tend to, because I work at Girls Who Code, because I'm a Black woman, they often ask me my opinion about diversity and equity and inclusion, which I'm happy to talk about. But I would like to be approached for also just to talk about trends in the industry and things that you would talk to, a male marketer about, or a white woman. So I'm very glad that we've had this conversation about industry trends, because that is something that I'm very interested in.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you on the podcast to talk about those things. Last couple questions. What's what are you proud of that maybe we haven't touched on the podcast so far?
I'm really proud of, on a personal note, I'm really proud that I've persevered in this field. I think that it can be difficult when you're working in an environment where you can't always see yourself in a leadership role. And it can be easy to say that, this is just not for me. Like, I've tried it and I think I need to move on to something else. So I'm really proud that I persevered in my career and persevered particularly in the marketing and advertising realm. I'm also really proud of making the transition from agency and corporate work to nonprofit and working, within an organization that values marketing and that values communications as a tool for not only getting our message across, but also a tool for culture change, which, marketing in a nonprofit is overhead. It is not, it's not something that is not programmatic. And, the fact that we fundraise for our campaigns and that we are valued within the organization and not just used as a tool to market our programs is been incredibly valuable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your perseverance is really going to resonate with the listeners. And also, it's wonderful work you're doing. You're doing great work. And I'm sure our listeners would love to connect with you as well on that. So what kind of... where can our listeners connect with you online? What are the best platforms?
So I am on Instagram and Twitter. My Instagram handle is, hold on. This might be an edit moment because I'm always giving people the wrong Instagram handle. Sorry.
No worries.
All right. It's AK_Gramby.
Okay, perfect. Is that for Instagram and Twitter as well?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Ashley, it's really been a pleasure to talk to you on the podcast. We usually like to end the podcast with the guest describing one word or phrase that describes their brand. So how would you describe Ashley Gramby's brand?
I would describe my brand as strong yet soft. I think that I am a good listener, and I think that, those insights I like to bring into my work. And I think that it's only made me a stronger marketer and a better teammate and a better leader.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you being on. You have such great stories and insights, and I'm sure the listeners would love it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you reached out to me and had me on. I'm excited to hear more episodes from you.
This episode of the CMO and Joe podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to help you create the profitable and successful business you've always dreamed of. And don't forget to rate and review so we can continue to bring you the best content. See you on the next episode.